The crack in the armor of the world. Nearly everyone understands that the sound of thunder follows the flash of lightning. Fewer understand that the flash we see with the eyes is also delayed in time, that the flash follows the actual bolt of lightning by a fraction of a second. If you explode a giant firecracker on top of Double Oak Mountain, you will see the flash there before I see it here 2 miles away, just as you will hear the explosion before I do. Light travels at a finite speed. The flash is fast, but not instantaneous. Now let me ask, do you see that there is something prior to your own world view of people, places, and things? That is, the image I see across the room or even in the mirror in front of me has something that precedes my view of it, delayed in time by a fraction of a second, just like the explosion on the distant hill. As you and I sit here talking to one another, you see your own hands folded in your lap before I do. Our views of your hands seem to be simultaneous, but they are not. At least not in the space-time world. Everyone thinks, but we see each other at virtually the same time. What difference can a billionth of a second make? Ask a particle physicist how much difference that amount of time can make. Years ago, when I first discovered the subjective nature of the tangible universe and realized there was something else standing behind everything the world calls material, I called it principle then, I realized that this knowledge should allow me to see evidences of that prior principle. Perfection, where I had been seeing sickness, life in place of death. But such evidences or demonstrations did not always come to me on schedule or in the manner I expected. There was no consistency. It wasn't until I discovered the chink in the armor of matter that I began having repeatable demonstrations, as the scientists would call their experiments. That chink has to do with space, time, and the speed of light. The crack appeared when the logical mind of me could concretely understand why and how it wasn't possible to look outside myself as consciousness and see something there instantaneously in time. But I could look within consciousness as awareness and perceive selfhood immediately. Then, that knowledge in hand, I could expect the image out there to confirm my self-knowing, precept upon precept, and it did, it does, it must. Who can explain this miracle to another? There certainly seem to be those within myself who are given to understand the subjective idea, and those who are not. I do not know why so few understand, especially metaphysicians, but I can guess with assurance that this is the reason men like Jesus have said throughout linear history, "Let him who has ears to hear understand." Now, we come to the wonder of wonders. Suppose I get up in the morning, look into the mirror, and see that image in front of me looking like death itself. What am I to do? I know that awareness doing the looking precedes that image in the world time. As awareness, I am pure and perfect, no matter what the mirror tells me, or the doctor tells me, or anyone else. Identified as awareness itself, I exist before time and space. I precede time and space. I precede the feelings of the body and any of its appearances. There is an instant of a second which permits, as time and space go, the misty, ordinary light to intrude with a delineating picture of things. I do not have to accept those appearances as final, nor continue to believe the humanly expected, causal, linear relationships to unfold in space and time as the world predicts. If I hold out my hand and see evidences of the most horrible sight there, a huge cancer, say, or an angry, sullen mate, I know that there is a lag between what I am and what I see, and that same lag permits the real light of truth to alter the tangible seeing with a picture of goodness. If a mother looks out and sees the sight of her child falling under the wheels of a great red truck, she does not have to see the mangled consequences of death and destruction following in time, because the glimpse of healing truth comes in that instant of an instant and is perpetually here to be seen when we look for it and confidently expect it. As the physicist or mathematician would say, the glimpse contains infinite possibilities within itself. But, my friend, I had to know why I didn't have to accept the appearance before I could expect to look back into the mirror again and see confirmation of the immaculate nature of awareness being confirmed in time and space. Again, I don't know why I had to know that, but I did. Perhaps you must too, if you expect to see the marvelous confirmations in your experience that I have seen in mine. This is not the only requirement, of course. There is still the matter of what one is to do with the glimpse and how one is to live the equation of living. When the physicist or astronomer begins to take the prior consciousness of himself, the experimenter, into account, and begins to examine the awareness, which is an integral part of every experiment, and precedes it in time, he will be able to prove the miraculous, even as I have. Why not? The difficulty for the scientists, as for each of us, is turning from self to self. The old nature of us has many vested interests and doesn't want to be forsaken. I don't believe my world out there is going to appear concerned about the perfect child within themselves that precedes tangibility in time and space until a common disaster looms for all mankind. Could that be what is turning the distant sky so dark and making all that thunder in the far places? Perhaps. But the disaster doesn't have to happen. What can we do to avert it? We find the child and live the child's equation.